This is Remo podcast. This is episode 10 with Chris. We are going to continue where we last left it. It's been 6 months now, but we're gonna pick it up again. And we ended up in Baltics Battalion in Latvia. Chris had already told us some stories about the squad training and all the subjects around that time. What was the year?
That was 95.
95, yeah. So 6 years out of Soviet Union, and as you can imagine, the overall area was very robust, as you can remember and recall from the previous times what we have discussed. But now today we're gonna continue from there, and I have also some ideas, some things I want to kind of go into, and we're gonna continue, and hopefully we will get to also to Estonia today, but we will see, depending on what topics come out and what topics come up. But yeah, anything you want to add, Chris, before I actually jump into?
No, that's fine. Let's now answer some of those questions.
All right, so one of the things that got me interested is that usually it's all of the trainings, all of the cooperation between different militaries, they're usually funded by someone, right? So this Baltic Battalion, who was it like funded by?
Actually, that's a good question, and it was actually supported by the Nordic countries. As I mentioned previously, it actually started from an idea by a Danish colonel. I believe he's still alive. And even America got involved. And at those stages, early stages, certainly, it didn't. We were not asking for the countries themselves to fund the project, because I don't think it would have happened otherwise. So Britain was asked to provide, or every country was asked to provide something. So straight away, if I use America and Britain to illustrate that initially, the British were asked to provide infantry training. No money, no infrastructure costs, no equipment, training. Because it was decided that the British infantry training was of a very high standard. I'm not going to use the best word. And I remain convinced that it actually is, you know. The Americans landed a Galaxy aircraft, which is, I'm pretty sure that's the right Galaxy. It's a massive I think it was the biggest aircraft in their fleet, and they arrived with equipment and weapons. So that's why the Baltic Battalion was dressed in American uniform. Eventually, didn't happen on day one, and they were eventually equipped with armour lights, with their own distinctive Baltic Battalion berry. And each Nordic country, whilst they provided instructors, they also provided mainly the HQ to our element, not the leadership, but the secondary roles, like the quartermaster was a Danish captain. We had a computer guy from Norway. So, and they also would provide, for example, television sets and computers eventually. So everybody had a designated equipment or a role, you could say equipment, and later some sort of training role. In particular, the Nordics were going to provide the mission-specific training on completion of our infantry training. So the Estonian platoon, they were going to go to Lebanon with the Nordics, the Norwegians in fact. So they actually went to Norway eventually and did mission specific training to work alongside the Norwegians in the Lebanon. And I know that the Norwegians were extremely surprised with the quality of troops they received. So that's how it was you could say funded, but it happened over a period of time. So for example, we had some American SF arrive, and they were not arriving to see us, but they arrived in Estonia, in Paldiski, because they always turned up. And in those days they were not allowed to do any military training. It was some rule in Congress, because I asked them about this. So they would, for example, give lessons in the battle school on how to vote. And when I come onto the battle school, I'll go into more detail about this nonsense, but it wasn't their fault. I believe they were just interested in getting boots on the ground in some shape or form. So of course, when they heard about our company in Paldiski, they wanted to go and see it. And it was a very cold winter. It was proper Arctic winter, -10, -15, I think even -20, and we were doing proper patrol bases. So you're going to sleep in your trench, your shell scrape, and they had a blanket, and the Americans couldn't believe it. And I said, well, it's all we've got. So there was a definite lack of equipment then, and in particular the webbing equipment. And I'm pretty sure at those early stages they still wore their own national uniform. In fact, they did, because they wore their own national uniform and their own national equipment and webbing, which did create. I wasn't going to say it created a problem, but you know what? It didn't, because we just made it work. And that's why I'm a great advocate of, if the training's quality, you don't need equipment to replace it. You can always find a way, and then when you do get the equipment, maybe it's a bit easier. Well, it is a bit easier. It's like an uplift, So I never allow the equipment issue, to say I can't do it.
Absolutely, it doesn't. It's not about the equipment ever. I mean, with me, I had the same experience. It was with my eyesight, actually. I wasn't able to see shit, and I was already like 2 years into the special operation unit. I went through all the trainings and everything, and then I was in a battle school doing the SUT, and then I was doing one, I don't know, approaching the target, and I was the squad leader who were supposed to kind of initiate the attack. And I remember that as I approached, I was seeing the enemy, but I wasn't able to see where they were looking, which way. Like, it was a blur. It was a total blur. And then I just, because I needed to get a grade, it wouldn't be a very good grade if the enemy saw us first. So I just randomly said, okay, now it's a good time to initiate the attack. And eventually it worked out in terms of getting the grade. And then I reported back to my team, our medic, that, hey, I can't see anything, right, really, and I don't want to wear glasses either. And so is there anything we can do? And then I was the first guy who got the actual operation done, financed by our medic, or our finances. And then in like 3 weeks or 1 month, my eyesight was now perfect. It was like I'm seeing like in 4K now, and previously it was like I saw nothing. And now the training, what I pretty much had done in 2 years, being blind, versus now having this enhancement, as you say, with my eyesight, it was just like, oh. So this is how now it just is so easy. It becomes such an easy thing. So I always have that same feeling. Like, it's not about the equipment. It's not about the new weapon system. If you have something what works at the moment, that's good enough. We don't need the high-speed gear. We don't need to change it out every 2 months, and we shouldn't concentrate on that part so much. We should concentrate on it, but not 80% of our time.
I would now add this point. I can recognise when I can recognise that there's a training problem, or people don't understand training when they think the best equipment will not only compensate, but is the solution to making the soldier a good soldier. I've seen that often, and I've heard some horror stories which our guys have seen in Iraq when they saw some Eastern European special forces actually arrive with all the black kit, looking, well, and they were terrible. They were terrible.
It's like people who are buying the new equipment for running, right? But they haven't ran at all.
Yeah, and I've seen the same with a civilian actually, when it came to navigating, and they thought, but just by wearing a silver compass around the neck, you were good to go. And
Absolutely.
I said, I don't think so. If you go walking on Dartmoor and you can't read a map and the weather closes down, you're gonna really be in trouble. Yeah, so. And of course, later on I can explain that in more detail of what I saw actually with the Scout Battalion.
Mm-hmm. But so there must have been some like political objectives somehow communicated to you as well, or like how much?
Okay, that's another good question. Another question. Well, straight away I can say that at that stage in my life, politics was completely over my head.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely and it was completely something that it was the opposite of the way that I saw the world and the military life. You don't get involved in politics. I don't need to understand politics. I just get out and do things. But I definitely came to realise, however, slowly, that there was obviously politics involved. Obviously politics involved. And of course, if I was to talk about with what I know now, obviously there was a massive amount of politics involved. So from my simpleton's point of view as a military guy, I did feel straight away we are putting our, if you understand this expression, we are putting our foot in the door before it closes. The door had opened slightly, and that foot got put in very quickly to stop it closing. And that's why when I was approached to come here, I was told it was a 5-month tour. We'd be back in May of 95 because nobody really had a solid plan. It's just get out there. We're gonna train these guys, and they're gonna go on a mission. And that, and I don't. Well, in fact, I'm pretty sure we didn't even know that then. It was just we're gonna go out and train people. And yet again, I don't need to be told anything else except you need to teach them up the company level. So I don't need to know anything else. That's what I'm trained to do. I'll go and do it. I'll do it anywhere. Just give me the people. I don't care what standard they're at. I'll just solve it. That's how we think. So, but I realise now it was a very important and bold step to make, and why they did it under circumstances that normally would create failure. And I do know that I heard later. Certain elements were quite shocked that we did so well because they were absolutely expecting it to fail. I certainly think that one of the high political aims was to find a way to bring the Baltics together. I you can perhaps answer this question for me, because it could be if I relate to Scotland, Ireland, and England, that sort of slight divide. We're all British, but we are still a bit different. And I remember being mentioned, which I didn't really take in at the time, but I fully understand now. And I did send a picture some time ago of the 3 Baltic presidents, and I was told that on that day that was the first time they'd actually all met together, and they met now under the Baltic Battalion flag. So that in itself, just getting the three Baltic countries working together was actually a major step to trying to draw the Baltics closer after it being part of the Soviet Union. So that was a definite political aim. Obviously, bringing a Western standard of military training eastwards was obviously a definite aim. Of course, Estonia and the Baltics were not part of NATO then, and there was certainly no mention of it. And it was absolutely not in my thought process whatsoever. At very high levels, maybe that foot in the door was the start of what we've got now, and I actually believe that to be the case. I also believe that we were called peacekeepers in the peacekeeping centre in Estonia, whilst it was a mistake which caused frictions which I'll describe later. It was because, understandably, as I now know, NATO had made an agreement with Russia that they wouldn't encroach upon their border. I do get it. I mean, that's politics. I would say, though, that any country hasn't got a right to tell another country who they have in their country. So I've got no problem with that. So yeah, whether they like it or not, we were the first encroachment by NATO by other means.
And I think that at the same time, the Russian troops also left the country, right?
Well, in fact, at that time, there was still... Okay, when I went to Paldiski, there were still Russian troops in Paldiski guarding the reactor.
Yeah. And
I was told, don't go in those areas. There's actually, I believe they were armed as well.
Yeah, that was like a crazy time in terms of like...
It was a crazy time, and actually I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed that.
Have you heard that? Because what I like about that area, what I've learned now about the history, that at that particular time, I don't know if you have heard it. Most likely you have, but there was like this 7 tons of rubles in a cellar in Estonia before, I don't know, winter, and it was obviously rotting there, and obviously the Russia didn't want to exchange them. They wanted to currency to just go inflate pretty much. But the Estonian government didn't have much money, and the Prime Minister Mart Laar, I think, was at the time, who, with other 2 ministers, kind of had a secret plan to exchange that the pile of rubles with the Chechenian rebels, and they did the exchange of the money in Latvia. In return, they got some dollars, which eventually kind of were used to pretty much, I don't know, survive the winter or whatever they did with that, right? And then after the Soviet, or at that time Russian troops kind of left the country, then it came out as a scandal where everything of that wasn't like not known by anyone, and then I think the Prime Minister had to kind of relieve from his position because he lied to everyone. But in reality, they kind of did something which which you don't see like these days, in terms of like they kind of did the right thing for the right reason, even though the rules didn't allow it to do. They did it anyway because that was the right thing to do, pretty much. Like they innovated, they actually did, and they had balls.
Moral courage.
Exactly, and it worked out. And later on, obviously, the Estonian secret police tried to kind of put some of them behind the bars. They failed because some of the higher court guy or the judge kind of said that, hey, boop, it made sense. It had logical reasoning. It actually like, and it was dismissed. But that's the kind of times.
Yeah, it was
those times were.
I mean, you know, this we'll talk about it. You know, it's jumping ahead a bit, but that's actually why I was fascinated with what I was doing, was because of what I called this craziness, which because I can't describe it any other way. It was just things I'd never seen before. The atmosphere was so different. Every day was a problem-solving situation, which I loved it. You know, it was weird. It was wacky. It was like I would probably start most days saying, "I don't believe that." All right, let's go and solve it. You know. So I did read about this actually quite recently, and the word moral courage cropped up straight away, because all's well that ends well. He actually did ensure that Estonia was able to financially survive and establish the croon. But if it had failed during the process of being a success, we would have gone to jail. And that's why when you win if you disobey orders because you think it's the right thing to do to take the objective, and it goes wrong, you're either dead or in prison. But if it goes well, you might get a medal. You know, and that's the difference. You know, so my guiding principle on this is what is it best for the corporate group? Is it best for the mission? It's nothing to do with is it good for me? And then it gives me a clarity of thought. Well, because you know what, I've done it many times. I'm not doing that. I've been told to do things. I'm not doing that. And I used to say to my guys, it's the yes sir but no game. Because you can't say no. You just say yes sir. And then I'll say we're not doing that. This is what we're going to do. And the success is that you do a good job, so you don't get caught out. But you know, that's how I think, and that's how I believe the way forward. So I commend the politician, because I feel that politicians nowadays, anywhere, certainly to different degrees, make decisions based on their own popularity about how it goes today, and not the long-term health of their nation. And it's all about, and it is about power. It's not about serving the people. So that's why I say again, and I've actually mentioned it to the Brits the other day. You know, moral courage. That's the thing I always look for.
And that's what I like. It's interesting that the politics clearly was there. You as a soldier kind of didn't care. You did what you had to do. You did your job. And that's, I think, what most of the soldiers usually do. Like, they just do what they are kind of asked. They don't, especially if you're younger. And if you maybe start thinking about some of the things too hard, and especially these days, like if all the information comes out about, I don't know, how we got into Iraq, how we left the Afghanistan, all that kind of other stuff, then your kind of, I don't know, decisions, now you start thinking about those things. But even though you as an individual, you kind of did what you were asked, you did your job, you did your best, and that's what matters. You didn't do the political decisions.
Yeah, well, at that level, it's certainly what I think about the Iraq or Afghanistan war is not going to change anybody. It's not going to change anything. And when I'm okay, be careful how I say this. Not to say, I'll just say it. One of my regrets, I hate using that word regret. you can only do in your service life what is historically happens or happens and becomes history. I would have loved to have been a section commander in those years of Iraq and Afghanistan in the Royal Marines. That would have been fantastic. Of course, under the caveat of you survive it and don't lose legs, you know.
Yeah.
But at the time, you know, and that's why actually politicians get away with sending you to stupid wars, because you want to do it, because you want to soldier. You've been trained as a chef, but you've not been allowed in the kitchen. You know, in war, it's the kitchen to the infantryman. Especially when you get now all the good stuff and all the ammunitions and all the equipment, and it's just and of course you don't think about politics. You don't think about right or wrong. You think about your unit, about your friends, and you're fighting for your friends, and nothing else. Of course, in the long term, when you come back and you become a civilian and you do lose bits and pieces of yourself, or you're mentally unwell, and you think, was it worth it? That's a problem that I think many soldiers will go through. So I wouldn't say it is partly a political thing when they come to realise that I went out there and I felt I got sold out eventually by my government.
What I was also thinking of like at that time there was politics, and I think that there was the same amount of politics as at the moment. It's just at that time you didn't have all in your pocket, like you didn't have access to it.
I didn't. I think I'm talking now, you know, with hindsight. I didn't understand all that at the time.
And now it's like everyone has this in their pocket possibility, kind of, to understand.
Now, from the my perspective of what I did in the Baltics, it was a great. It was a great. I was lucky to be in this right place at the right time to be here, because it was everything I want. It was everything about why I joined up. So I suppose really, I couldn't do this, but I could do this, you know, because of my when I was born. So everything equals out, you know. I was lucky with the Falklands War because I felt that was absolutely a just war, and also we were the underdog because we were outnumbered and outgunned, and we won. So everything about it, and also because everybody thought we would fail again. Although at the time, there was no way we could lose because of the way I felt I was trained and we were trained and how we were led. So there was never any doubt in my mind. But realistically, if I was being objective as a third person, I would be amongst that group, like the Americans saying, "Well, yeah, you're not going to get away with that," because we were attacking very steep mountains, and we were outnumbered 2 to 3 to 1. And it's the other way round. We should be 2 to 3 larger than the group we're attacking. So, yeah, and that's why we were never given a proper intelligence brief in any of our orders before we landed, because I think the hierarchy thought it might worry us. It might
discourage you.
It might discourage us. It might lower morale. They were wrong. They were wrong. They were wrong. They were wrong. And that's why, as I mentioned on that fighting patrol, and I spoke to the troop commander on the reunion, was it 3 years ago, and I said to him, my memory, I'm pretty sure of this, you didn't tell us the actual mission that we did, because I'm older and bolder and I understand all this a lot more now from a planning, leading, and all the rest of it approach. I said, you did not give us the mission that we did, which was to actually attack a battalion dug in defence. That's what we did. So you could call that a fighting patrol, stroke probing patrol. How it eventually, because that's what it was really. It was a combination of both, and I get that. He obviously didn't want to tell us that we were going to walk into a battalion until we had a contact, and we're not going to come back until that happens, because I know that he was told by the company commander, don't come back unless you have a contact. So, and he also got told, if you have a casualty, just tough, you keep on going, you know. And that's when I, in older age and things, I realise now that actually war and our military hierarchy are ruthless. But you know what? I accept that. I totally accept that, because it was necessary, because what we did and what we provoked allowed our OP to establish where the enemy was. So when the CO made his plan of attack, he had all the information to make a fantastic attack through a minefield, through the rear, to attack them in their weakest position. And in the balance of things, and also I found out the CO had said that he was prepared to lose the platoon. And I totally get that, I accept that. Because I realised that on the balance of things, you know, that's the way it is. And that's, again, why I say tell the truth, you know. And I would say that was one mistake by our hierarchy.
So, could it also be like... maybe you were told the mission, like I just got thinking and putting that in perspective of how the operation orders are at the moment kind of put together. Just I feel that what they didn't tell you was the why, and also what is the intent from 2 levels up. Like, what's the overall intent?
Well, they didn't do that, because the mission was. Our mission is to dominate no man's land, and to make contact, you dominate no man's land in order that any enemy in that area we meet, we fight, we dominate, kill or destroy, or capture, you know, something like that, in order that the Argentine forces do not wish to use this area or dominate it, to allow the unit, when we do the approaching for the battalion attack, we don't meet Argentine forces. So that's something that could have been said, wasn't said, because actual fact we didn't even do that, because the actual mission was our mission is to make contact with an Argentine battalion in order that they shoot at us from every position, which will enable the OP to record all the muzzle flashes, in order that the battalion commander can make an overall plan based on this information in 2 or 3 days' time. That's what that would have, you know. That is like, oh yeah, right. You know, we would have accepted that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would have been even better off to making it happen, because
when it
you
happened,
need the whole. Yeah.
Well, when it happened, I wouldn't have been so shocked.
Yeah.
And as I say, my old boss has actually sent me a map that's marked from the intel brief that he was told where to go. It is exactly where we went, and he exactly knew that the Argentine forward troops are right where we're going. And I've actually seen a photograph recently of it, and we were actually between 20 meters and less of the first platoon dug in defence. And we had a 2.5 hour firefight, what I told you about. Really, in fact, I now recognise, because we were so close, it probably saved us, because all the hill opened up on us, and actually other features opened up on us. So it was actually, from a visual perspective, it was actually really beautiful. You know, all this tracer floating down, tracer floating from other directions. It was quite like, whoa, you know, you could actually sit back in an armchair with a cigarette and a glass of whiskey going, hey, what a great floor show. But the Fortunately, the rounds were going high because they were having to shoot over their own troops, and to shoot at us, they would have had to shoot through their own men. So I think they were. I think because of our weight of firepower, they thought they were being attacked by a battalion, so they were shooting in depth as well. So, but we certainly shook up the entire feature, and everybody was shooting, and that's why that I understand. I completely understand now by seeing it that if you're in defence, you have to be very careful for when you open fire, because when you open fire, you give your position away. And if it is a probe patrol, you're actually doing what the patrol wants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and of course we had all the artillery. Our artillery, which we used against them, so it also would have been a morale buster for them. And of course, fortunately, because we all survived, next day they would have found all this empty, like my empty 66s, all the empty cases, all the shredded link, and there'd have been and nobody, no injured, no dead from our side, and it had been like, well, you know. So I think we shocked them quite a lot. And you know what? At the time though, when I got back and everything else, I never, and until recently, I never ever thought about it. It was just something we did, and that was it. Which I think is a good thing. Yeah, we just did that. Yeah, so what, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine that.
So I never thought about it.
Yeah, like and in terms of like the same thing with the politics, I think what got me also interesting when you were speaking is that I think you said that most likely like what you kind of did, it kind of should have been failure, or it should fail. It's kind of like a mission impossible what you tried to start there with the Baltic Battalion and everything like that. So I think that it's very like competitive to Ukraine at the moment in terms of when the war started in 2014. Now it was a conflict already. It wasn't just a peace like it was here.
Just the initial stages.
So the interesting part is that the Americans, the Brits, the Baltics, a lot of troops actually utilized that time or space when the door was still open, it was now opened pretty much because the Russians kind of stabbed the Ukrainians in the back. So now the door opened. Hey, maybe there's a possibility to start supporting them. That's where a lot of units in 2014, 15, 16, 17 until I think that 2022 were actually starting to teach and train the troops that actually were deployed to the front line in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia since 2014. So there, it still led to this big war, right? It kind of didn't stop it. But here in the Baltics, this actually was kind of the different kind of result in that sense, because some troops came in. There was different times, obviously, as well. There was more struggle, I guess, the more power vacuum at the time in the eastern side, because everyone wanted to be on the rule. Now there was a certain, at the moment there is no power vacuum there. it's clear who's on power. But what I'm kind of going at is that it feels to me like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and like the Baltics, we're just so small. And the change here is possible on much more rapid pace than it would be in country like Ukraine, because it's vastly bigger. It's much harder to influence it. Here it's like we are just in a corner. It's a very tight space, and I think it was very clear also by that time that what we don't want, because Ukraine kind of it wasn't the worst. They were kind of powerful. They had nukes. They had a lot of kind of stuff. So they were not like a small country like Estonia at the time when we got independent. So I think that the one of the success criteria, and I would like to hear what you think those things could be, is that we were very small, and I think that we recognized very early what we don't want, and we kind of didn't want the East. We had a plan which was a direction. Hey, EU, whenever we get there, then there is no excuses to get to NATO. We have to get to NATO, and then we are part of a bigger kind of team. And I think it only happened because we were small, because it didn't happen with Ukraine or in the same way, even though it could have in a way happened the same way. So, what's your take on that? I think that's something which for sure
I've got to
must
find
play in.
I've got to find a way to explain this from my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
It is good. It is. It's absolutely brilliant that Estonia is in NATO. It's actually brilliant that they're in the EU, because I think, from a small nation status, that's an absolute must. You can only be big by being part of a much bigger group. Because I would say that NATO and the EU may not be for everybody. You know.
Mm.
I am not convinced the Estonian military, in those early days, those early years, formative years, had any inclination towards NATO. I'm not convinced. And yet again, I say that not to provoke, but I'd be interested that someone to say, well, actually, I was the child in '97 and that's our intention. Oh, great. And I'll make that comment because it was obvious that British military training was NATO training, and yet they tried everything. They did not support it, and they tried to crush it, which doesn't make sense. And from the other side perspective, where I came from, they didn't follow it up. They didn't follow up, which was so successful, and they had no long-term vision either, because from, let's say, the Commandant General of the Royal Marines, Lieutenant General, it's not his decision to make NATO policy for the Baltics, but obviously the people who sent us out here, it was their responsibility that if that's going to be the end state, that they then ensure that the military is given tasks commensurate with that, which didn't happen. Well, I suppose it did in small ways, but it goes back to my original comments about when people come here just doing bits and pieces which aren't connected to a long-term end state, with the end state being part of NATO. And if you're part of NATO, you have to be able to work alongside. So what does that mean? Well, the obvious. You're doing things the same way, because they're on NATO standards.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the Baltics and Estonia became part of NATO due to obviously a political decision, but I don't feel that from the military point of view those dots were connected. And
I think I agree.
And anything that's happened for the good is just unsystematically happened. And I have to admit, though, that have happened for the good because of the start of the Baltic Battalion project. Because of people who were trained, they themselves joined the dots. Now, of course, when the lower elements join the dots, it's not the same as the political and military leadership will to do that. And that's why what I've often seen is the lower level has pushed up from the bottom to get things done, which is the wrong way round. But you know, the force of a river will find its own path if it's not guided or channeled.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you can understand that description.
Yep.
Descriptive.
Yep.
So I feel the greater will of the boots on the ground have forced the direction of the flow of the training or river. And now that NATO or we're fully integrated with NATO, it needs to be decided that river flow, if I use that expression, that a river that flows without proper direction will find its own way, and to get from point A to point B, because it meanders, is a longer distance. So by using that descriptive, if the hierarchy now make the channel to get to the end state by making it a straight line, so that flow gets there quicker. And I do believe now with the present leadership they're trying to do that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I get it. And which way you think? Can you provide what moves do you think are contributing to that?
For me, for me, I would say this: choose which country or their training methods that you wish to follow. Bearing in mind, every NATO country should be doing it the same sort of way. And of course, that doesn't mean to say you do everything they do. You make it the Estonian way. Mm-hmm. It's the Estonian way. And I use this my own methodology. When I came here, I didn't force anything upon anybody. I just said, what do you want to do? And let's say troop attack. All right, how do you do a troop attack? They then told me what they did. I said, well, would you like to do it this way? Mm-hmm. And they said, yeah. And they could see the difference. But if on anything we do, there's, because of Estonians' terrain or other weapon systems and the rest of it, if you need to change it, we can or modify it. Because it shouldn't have to change too much, but you modify it, it becomes Estonian. And if you don't change it, it still becomes Estonian. And I do know that a lot of the things that we teach with basic infantry skills, we copied from the Germans in World War II.
I think that's what most successful.
They were, because they and I've seen some German sniper training films. I recognise it completely. You know, I recognise it.
There is a report from the Second World War from Americans, like I think in 42 or something, where they which were now released, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago, which kind of explains what they see or what they have seen in the past 15 years in Germany at that time, and how they kind of picked out their leaders, how they got their officers to be on such a high level, like all of the stuff what they did with the youth, how they kind of built up everything from the scratch, and it was like all of the things what they did and how they did it all made sense. It was kind of brilliant the way how they built up the force, the quality of it. And what Americans had the possibility to do is that as they were detached, they looked at it and obviously recognized that there has been a long gap between the First and Second World War, which they have been sleeping on, doing nothing. And obviously after the Second World War, they got a really good understanding what to do next. And I think that contributes a lot into why they have such a, I guess, big force. That's one part of it, obviously. But the Germans, they had a very, very good system how to fight wars, for sure.
Well, the training system and they operated in is I think what we're doing now. Mission command. You don't tell a guy how to do it. You just tell him what his task is.
Exactly.
And then he decides how he's going to do it.
It's much faster.
The old British way was this is what you're gonna. This is your mission, and this is how you're going to do it. Mm. And because of the way they were taught to follow orders, on the ground, if it was different, they still did it the way they were told.
Yeah. And now you have some people facing the wall. No, it's based on SOP. I need to look at them, but even though there's a wall.
and that's why we get it. You're doing this in order that. So if when you do something, you realise you can jump a few phases, or you once you've done it, you need to do this to fulfil that order. For example, if I was told to go and do reconnaissance for an ambush site in order to go and kill terrorist A, if I was now on a recce, you are meant to keep out of contact with the enemy. You're there to gather information only. But if I saw terrorist A on the way to recce the ambush site, well, I'm going to kill him. Because I know we're recceing the ambush site to make an ambush to kill him. So now I've not got to do the ambush.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a great believer in a, but that can only happen though if people are trained and also are intelligent, because then they can make their own decisions based on the information they see on the ground. And of course, everything changes and evolves when you're in a battle, so you're continually reevaluating, how do I do it?
Mm-hmm. So do you recall that, like, if that was one of the things, like, do you recall when that changed in actual training in Brit system? Because the command and control type of thing, or not decentralized command, or not the mission command, and then second thing is that were you already training that with the Baltic Battalion at that time, like trying to show them how the decentralized command or the mission command works?
Certainly. When I was a young Indian doing it, I didn't understand all these things. I just was taught and I did things. Yeah, I know within my corps, we are very much into being allowed to make our own decisions. Once you get given something to do, you do it. The neat thing is you do it well, and that's why the squad leader within the Royal Marines ends up doing most things. We don't really, once the troop commander explains what he wants, we go away and do it. We haven't got to keep on going back asking him how to do it. He can't. In fact, often we have to guide him. So we actually ensure that our squad leaders and troop sergeants are absolutely very well trained and tested. Because only if they are very well trained and tested will that system work. And then it is very easy to do what we've just talked about. If you don't do that, you end up with a system where nobody does anything unless they are told to do it. Open the door, close the door. That's it. So they opens the door, closes the door, nothing else. And certainly within the British Army, that's how it used to be at one time. And I know one of the common fallacies, and it's even said to me recently, it must have been terrible when you even got told when to take a shit. They thought you were that controlled. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, "Don't be so stupid. Go away." But I certainly understand why in the past this may have had to have been the case, due to controlling a large body of ill-disciplined men from a rough background, with poor education and with limited training. And in many ways, in the First World War, for example, when I read books, I realise that the troop commanders were really doing things that we would expect our section commanders to do, and more, and do it a lot better. And that's why in the First World War, the troop commanders were normally the first to die, because they literally did lead from the front, because nobody else did anything except follow that man. Then got told what to do. The British actually came to realise this problem, and in fact the Canadians first understood it. I think it was the Battle of Cumbria. There was a major battle in World War I, about 1917. There was a feature of piece of ground that they tried so often to take. And they kept, and we're talking, thousands upon thousands of the casualties, continually trying to retake this piece of ground. And they gave the task for a Canadian general to do. And he realised that the reason why battles would peter out was that the troop commanders were being killed. The men hadn't been told what to do or trained to do. So when the troop commander was killed, and nobody had been told any information or trained properly, they just stayed where They just stayed where the troop commander was killed, you know, and that was it. The battle would stop, and also once one group stopped, another group on their flanks could stop as well. So what he did, he decided that the sections, everybody in the section has to know what their task is. He had to ensure that the section commander knew what his task was, and that on the entire battlefield, down to the section, they knew that their mission is to take this piece of ground or to do this. So if somebody else on the left or right flank or the troop commander was killed, they still knew what to do. And that's when they introduced a light machine gun into every section, because they realised that now the independent, or the section that can now move independently, can also have that firepower to cover them for their, what I call, the piece of the cake. And he actually won that battle. He won it decisively.
But would you say that that kind of lesson learned actually got implemented after the First World War? Because the winners usually don't learn.
No, it didn't. And I'll tell you why. In World War One, the most superior arm of the British Army was the cavalry. Unfortunately for the cavalry, they become impotent and became infantrymen in World War One, because the cavalry charge would literally die a death. And the cavalry regiments are the ones that are also associated to the royalty and all the rest of it. They're the prestigious regiments, the guards and all the rest of it. Well, when World War One finished, and all the lessons that were learned, and things had changed a great deal. I've read some of these books and military training pamphlets where they really are writing down all the ways to move and all the drills and skills, and it was forgotten because the cavalry looked on with disdain at the infantry, and they wanted to reimpose the cavalry traditions. And they didn't want to listen and continue and build upon what was learnt in World War One, and they paid a price for that in World War Two. If it wasn't for the Channel, Britain would have been defeated easily. I do believe, however, after World War Two, that lesson was learnt in a big way, and things haven't changed.
Yeah, because if you're so close to losing, I mean, you should start learning and paying attention. And why are you losing?
And General Montgomery gets a lot of criticism, actually, but there's one thing that I read about him which actually gave him a lot more credibility in my eyes. So there was two things. He said, I can't actually make bold plans of attack. He said, because the men aren't we haven't got time to get all the men trained to do it. And the other thing was that he found that lots of senior officers were completely incapable of learning the new ways of warfare, and he dismissed them without a qualm, without batting an eyelid. You're sacked. And he replaced many commanders with what would have been very junior officers. For example, a battalion commander in the British Army at 26. Unheard of. Although, you know what? They did replace these guys at the end of the war who were very successful, and replaced them with what was described, so I'm talking now real time from a book I read, by the same crusty people who were removed. And this guy was destined to be the head of the British Army, and he was actually at the time the most highly decorated infantry officer in the British Army, and he actually left because he was demoted from lieutenant colonel to captain, and the people who were put to a flank and stayed in England, they become the CO, for example, and they introduced the old crusty traditions, and he couldn't get his head around that. So there was some of that going backwards, but I still believe that infantry training, though, and the methodologies they used and copied from the Germans have ensured that I think we've got a very good infantry training system, very good.
Now I think that the people you kind of saw in Estonia here or in the Baltics, where they didn't even know that, they didn't even know how you fought in the First World War, because I mean, like the Soviet conscription service was nothing to do with fighting in terms of, like it was pretty much very similar to what they're doing at the moment, where pretty much it's very centralized command, right?
Well, our philosophy, for want of a better word, is that everything is about training. So when I went to work every day, we're training. Now, of course, that's in the infantry role. Mm-hmm. If I was perhaps a chef, I'm not learning how to cook. I'm cooking the food for today's lunch. But for the infantry, in particular, every day is spent training, and it's also much repetition. Of course, as a trainer, to make repetition worthwhile, it has to be progressive and worthwhile. Sometimes it's not, but that's my attitude. I'm going to make sure people understand why we're doing it, and maybe why we've got to do it again and again and again. But every time we do it again, there's a new problem or something's harder which they've got to achieve. So it's not doing the same thing exactly the same again, just doing it to a higher standard and with other problems. So you can literally train hard, fight easy. And it actually is that. And our entire system is built to support training. So if we look at everything as a pyramid, the hierarchy is at the top of the pinnacle of the pyramid, but the focus and effort on the bottom of the pyramid goes towards training and everything else that is built up to support it. What I didn't understand at that time, and obviously I don't think I understood it for many years, was that for reasons which are obvious and I understand, a lot of the hierarchy, even with new training, but saying that the more senior they were with high rank, they had no more training, perhaps, to limited, and they, because of the Soviet background, and I totally understand this. It's about what you've done, and when you make decisions, one of the methods in leadership is you have a vision of what you want. It's a vision. Now, if you're building something new for the first time, you've got to be a bit of a genius to actually envision how to do it, and that's why you may make lots of mistakes until you go, Eureka! That's it. That's the way. Well, my vision is not my vision. It's the vision that I've experienced by seeing and doing in my military career. So when I come to make decisions, I've got a great vision of so many things and then based upon how I'm taught to do business. So if you tell me to go and train the Iraq troop, well, I've got a vision. If I was a cook or a civilian, I'd be like, whoa, whoa. But I've got a vision. I go, wow, right, I've got all these pictures, all these ways of, and of course I can also, in my vision, can see my shortcomings in, okay, what have I got to build upon? What have I got to find out? What do I need help with? Mm-hmm. The vision that many other commanders had, and I'm not going to talk about the Baltic, about Estonia, because I wasn't in Latvia or Lithuania, but I think they're going to be pretty similar, is that people were making decisions based on their previous Soviet past. And it just goes back to my previous statement saying that many of these people fought change because they didn't understand it. And you would fight change if you felt that it is the complete opposite to what you've done in the past. So a rifleman in the Soviet army is literally, well, piece of shit. I hate saying that. Piece of shit, nobody, stupid, ruffian. They don't need training. It's like, no, give them a rifle, job done. Give him a rifle, hard, harsh discipline, so he does what he's told, and he doesn't need to know anything else. Now, if you've got that as a vision of how you conduct training, you know, that's what they're going to make their decisions based on that. So when you are then, you want money and equipment and time and effort and resources to then do what they did in a week, and you want 6 months, they're like, no way. And if they've got a closed mind not to accept change, or at least, you know, that's why I'm not dismissive of anything. If somebody says to me, I can do it in a day, and I can do it, I think it takes 6 months, all I'm going to say is, show me. That's it. Show me then. Great. If I can do that in a day and not 6 months, I'm for the one day. But they never did. But they did show me, because I would have the product to train, and they couldn't do anything really worthwhile without my understanding that if they were to attempt to do things, talking about what we've just talked about, the mythologies and mission command and the rest of it, you're going to die. And if you've got literally millions of troops to waste by charging, well, and that was the tactic the Soviets used in World War II. They were successful because they had so many men. They didn't care about wiping out battalion upon battalion, and that's why one of their strategies was, tactic was to charge at the Germans, and then when they die, pick up the rifle of the guys behind him who haven't got a rifle, and continue. And when they die, the next group do the same thing until the Germans run out of ammunition. And that was actually a tactic they used. And I actually read a book by a German, or autobiography, and he was a machine gunner, and he was talking about literally the heaps of Russians in front of him. And he actually described this tactic, and that's, you know, why I always remember it. He said, and guess what? We were running out of ammunition. We barely survived it, and and he was actually crying. He was crying about it. He said, he was crying, seeing heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of bodies in front of him. And he said, but the Russians or the Soviets didn't care about it, you know. And that's when they came to describe the Soviets as animals, because if they'd such a lack of disregard for humanity, you know, which then breeds even more contempt and more hatred and more violence. Because people are people. So I could never change their mind, because I couldn't get them to look. And when you look, you start to visualise and gain a vision. I personally think that deep down they knew, but for reasons even I can't explain, they chose not to. And that's why, as I said before, when the American colonel came out to see me with the Iraq troop, he would say, "Oh, because he loved what he saw. He loved it." And he said, and of course he expected, when he asked me, "Oh, you know, how many visitors do you get?" The answer was none. 0. And after 5 years, I had 0.
0 visitors.
Yeah. No, there was one, and he was a former Baltic commander. And a good man, very good man. Yeah, that was the only, you know. But he was, you know, yeah. But the people who should have been coming, should have came. I personally feel that deep down they knew, and they there was a psychology of I don't want to see. I will never understand that because it was very detrimental to the future of military training in Estonia, and now 20 years later, more than 20 years later, more like 30 years later, the Chod has made a decision to try and bring back what we should have built upon systematically, because eventually, as I explained in that last article, you're going to forget a lot of the great things that were taught and learned. It'd be a lot harder now with all the people that are here, but it can still happen, especially when you've got the older people with the vision who have now left because they become old men. And that's why I, for example, I talk to those Brits to try and explain some history of what's happened, so they don't make the so if they do something, it's got to be to build logically, to build and to educate, not only training, but everybody's got to be on the same song sheet, for want of a better way to describe it, because I still think we're not.
So you kind of it's very hard to kind of imagine like what even opened up the mind or opens up the mind of a person who has been in like occupied or in the other type of mind, or another type of seeing the world in totally different lens, because that's all they know, right? It's many times in the Russian military as well, or in the history there, where I mean, you got beaten up in your basic training, you have no idea why, you hated it, but now as you become the trainer of the next recruits, you will do the exact same, because that's the only thing you kind of know. You don't know why, because you're like you're like a monkey.
You believe it's because you're also not taught to cognitively think about it, why you do it. That's what I'm a great believer in. Why do you do that? So it could be that you are beating someone up. If you can explain to me why it's a good thing, I'll beat someone up. I can do that. But you've got to justify it. Because you know what? In our training and after that, we are beaten up, you could argue, because to the point of exhaustion, sometimes near to the point of death. I mean, and a lot of things we did, I'd much rather you beat me up rather than do that. Well, I'd want to kill the instructor. I was under such pain doing something physically. But you were never touched. Never touch someone. You never touch someone. Never. And of course I fully understand that why you've got to be fit and strong and why you've got to carry so much weight, because if you can't, you actually will then suffer properly in the wrong place at the wrong time and then get yourself killed or get someone else killed. So I fully, and that's why when I was on the All Arms Commando Course training team, for example, and I'd see quite senior people suffering and really making mistakes under pressure, they had no sympathy from me. And I know I'm a decent person, but there's no sympathy. You're going to do it or you can go off.
Yeah.
Because that's it, If you can't do it,
So I think that the it was a very vast and difference what the Estonians and all the Baltic Battalion people had experienced before, right?
And that's why. Sorry, I'll try and sum it up this way. Obviously, this was well above my pay grade at the time. And I'll also say, and I'll try. Maybe I'm going to say it, and if I can add to it later, I will. One of the biggest mistake that we made when we put our foot in the door was that the people who should have recognised this didn't, and they should have ensured that what we did was amalgamated with the highest command within, in my case, Estonia, and not on a personal level by, like, because for example I use General Kurt. He was great because you know what, he was Soviet past, but he would come and watch us in Latvia, and he saw what was going on, and the men would also brief him, and he was chief of staff then. He gained the vision. He was great. It was exactly how it should be, but that was on his own personal level because he chose to. It has to be at governmental MOD level where a memorandum of understanding is signed that we are, and I'm just going to say it, we are going to follow the British training system. We're going to use their pamphlets and information, and we're going to and all the things that will happen underneath it. For example, we're going to have our battle school which was the NCO school, then will be twinned with the infantry training school in Warminster, England, which you could have eventually you could have a guy from Estonia go to that school, to train people, and vice versa. So you ensure standards. For example, we do the same in Britain in our unit. For example, we have Americans and Australians.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's called cross training, and you might learn something from what they do, and vice versa. But you start off on the level that we want to do things to a high standard, and we are obviously using something very similar, if not the same.
I think why those decisions are not made very often is because people are, I guess they really pretty much they just need to take a leap of faith that system will work out best for the country or whatever, and then they get into this whatever analyze paralyze place. They don't do decisions like Mart Laar. I mean, hey, we have this money, I put my head on the line, if it doesn't work I will get shot or whatever. So we kind of needed the same type of people on top of the military to kind of, hey, because there will be so many people who will kind of think it's a stupid idea, it will never work. There will be people who will be fighting against it because it will be a major change. But if a change would have made based on, I don't know, available information, because the top has no understanding what's going on the front lines in terms of the training quality, or they only can go there and check it. But even if they didn't go there to check it, it didn't even enter their mind, but only the Kurt was there to kind of witness it in a way. So it takes a lot of balls pretty much to just make that decision, because you will be held accountable for everything, and there will be a lot of people who will actually work against this change for sure.
Yeah, as you can't make a decision unless you gain all the facts, and they chose not to gain the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just making decisions without facts, just based on what they knew previously.
Yeah, I think that's what the old system teach them.
And whilst I might have a vision of, I know it's going to be crap if you do it that way, but you know what? I won't say it. I will go and investigate, and they've got to prove to me that my judgment to myself was correct. And you know what? Maybe it's good. Wow, actually that's good. I was wrong, and I'm then gonna change and adjust. That's where you've got to have an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
And also the other thing is to be a bit humble. And I'd say this: ego is a bad thing. Ego and pride. I mean, pride in the. It's good to have, obviously, unit pride, self pride and pride in yourself, but just pride for pride's sake. I think people are, what we say, too proud to learn, too proud to accept. Then
Would you say also it's like a cocky?
Yeah, and that becomes. So if I see somebody who's cocky, that's a bit of a combat indicator to me that arrogance. Arrogance normally means to me that that arrogance is like a shield to keep you away, because they know that if you if they allow you to interact with them too much, you're going to find out the truth about them.
They're insecure.
They are insecure, so they actually hide behind arrogance. And I've seen that many times in bad leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind you being arrogant, but you've got to prove to me you are absolutely perfect. Then I go, well, let's see, he can be arrogant. He's actually so good. He's got, and I've never yet come across anybody like that.
Mm-hmm.
I normally find that really good guys are just don't give off that vibe. They're very casual doers. Just go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they need to kick ass, well, they can kick ass. And you can change your temperaments due to the situation. But you start off level-headed, and prepared to learn from other people.
And yeah, I think when you're also training the frontline troops, that you can actually kind of bring in the humble training, which actually will destroy some egos. And I think that's something what you most definitely did there, because they were not able to do things before, and you had your initial training objectives there, and you did your job, which by design makes people more humble, because it's hard training. And you realize that you have no understanding of how to do all of those things. And these dudes, they actually speak things, and actually when we try it actually freaking works that way. So maybe we should kind of take a leap of faith, because it seems to be working.
So that's why from the highest level, they should have been part of the project at the beginning, legally bound so, and that wasn't so. So they actually fought against it, and I'll say no more about this, because I want to discuss that at the right time. But I'll finish it with one comment from. In fact, I'm going to see him actually next week. This guy, he's just retired. He was a young lieutenant then. He'd been a tank driver in the Soviet army, and he told me that on day one, they thought it was a waste of time. What we doing this for? And we actually taught them how to use the AK as well. And I remember actually on the first lesson I gave, they were like a bunch of bandits. They looked like a bunch of bandits, weapons everywhere, It's just, it didn't, and So I sort of get it, What's some Westerner doing teaching me how to use the AK? I was in the Soviet army. I've been using it for years. Mm-hmm. I might have used it in Afghanistan, for example, and everything else. But at the end of training, he said to me, "What I learnt was that I knew nothing." And it was like a realization. And if only the hierarchy, who the the real decision makers and supporters, if they'd had some way to educate them that way, they would have realised, well, you know what I thought was good is really, really not good. And I can see now we've got a solution, and we've got help, and we can actually change things very quickly. Didn't happen though. I'll explain that in the future when we get to talk about things.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's very common in not only in the military, but what I've seen also in the civilian sector here is that sometimes with the people who need the most training, or like in that case it was the top leadership who wasn't even in the country, but in many cases it's also like, hey, I need my squad to start doing a great job, and if I were to order the training from you, I wouldn't participate because I'm the squad leader and I don't need it. My team needs it because they suck. And then you actually train the team, but in reality, like, hey, you as a squad leader need to be part of it because you are the problem. Because you are not leading it. And in many cases it's like, hey, let's send the people to the training because they need training. I don't need it.
Yeah.
And it's all bullshit, right?
Yeah,
so
you'd need to be part. Well, it's the squad. You need to be there. You need to do it.
Absolutely.
You need to do it. I actually had a real time problem. I had a chief instructor from the battle school, and he was going to Afghanistan, and that's how he thought. I don't need to be part of that. That's I'll just jump in at the right time. And when I said, well, basically, no, you're doing it, and he was rubbish. And
Well, absolutely.
he actually left the army because of it, because the men are going to war, and some of those guys had been before, and they now saw how bad he was, and they're looking at him like, you're going to kill me, you're an idiot, you know. And he got that vibe, and of course I'm quite sure they said things to him as well, over a beer maybe, or in the barrack room, because when it's in peacetime, people just go, okay, all right, it's just the way it is. Got a bad section commander, bad leader. He tells me what I do. I've got to agree with it. I've got to do it, otherwise I'm punished. But when it's real time, wartime, and they know his decision's going to get me killed, people are prepared to even be punished by speaking up. And that's why, on the greatest level, I hate saying this, certainly in the old days, I would sort of joke, but you know, sometimes when you joke, there's an element of truth in it. I would say, what Estonia needs is a little war. You know, just where they come in, and the hierarchy get the shock of their lives, and they suddenly realise that, oh my God, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, they can't do this, and it's really in your face what you can and can't do. And then they withdraw, and they realise their mistake, and they now make good.
It's you need the right amount of crisis.
Yeah, I like that. The right amount of crisis, which is an uplifting experience to, as I say, light a fire under your ass to change your ways.
Mm-hmm. It's like it's not supposed to kill you, and that's how you actually understand. Yeah. Like, if you almost got killed. And
that's why I've mentioned before about this. It should have been the Baltic Brigade, not battalion. Because the mistake we made was not involving senior leadership or training middle management as they progress upwards to continue, because they become the complete influencers and decision makers. Because we could have had a lot of the people who spent their entire lives sat in the EDF HQ now in situ as part of the brigade staff, with 3 battalions, and when they make wrong decisions, or seeing the men haven't been trained properly, they get massive casualties, and that would shock people. And also, what I found on the company and troop level, people get very serious about what's going to happen, and they want to try and solve that problem before they go. Obviously, the more you've got, the harder it becomes. But I certainly think that by making sure that you had a brigadier, colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, as part of the as leading a battalion, leading a brigade, and all the correct staffs underneath it, real time in situ, with people die by making wrong decisions, where people die even when you make good decisions, but less of, hopefully, that fire would have been lit a long time ago. Because when the Iraq troop came back, they knew very well, or the troop commander, just use that level, the troop commander knew very well why things have to be done a certain way. But he hasn't got the authority to change anything. And it's just in his own way. And that's why I talked about before, becomes unsystematic, where if he goes to a battalion or he goes to another company, he can use what he's learnt, but when he goes, it's forgotten. Or loses a lot of its impact. But if it's a major or colonel, when they come back, they can now start imposing a lot down.
To me, you know what it feels like. I don't know. How do you remember how big the army at that time in Estonia was, like in total numbers?
I think there was about 2,000 professional NCOs and officers. By professional, I mean getting paid.
So, like, I think that the best way would kind of do a kind of a conscript service type of thing. Like, okay, it doesn't matter what your rank is at the moment. It doesn't matter how old you are. Everyone will now start and go through 1 year of pretty much first 3 months will be the boot camp for everyone, all 2,000 people, and you will get to understanding what it means to be a machine gunner, what it means to be doing whatever, and then you take out kind of the best, and kind of you kind of do pretty much a full reset. Obviously, you have the ranks from those things, but you should also reset that, because I guess that's not really relevant, because you have people who are running things in a very wrong way or wrong manner. So it will take a lot of time, but I think that even doing that first 3 months all together with 2,000 people would then eventually kind of show how bad it is to be, like, it will actually humble people, and it will make so good, like everyone now understands what everyone has been through at least.
Well, the thing is, in a system that does happen, because if you become a Royal Marines officer, you're going to do everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, exactly. You don't get a different rifle lesson. You don't get a different machine gun lesson. You don't get a different standard. You don't put a bivvy up in the field a different way. You don't do a section tack a different way. And they do it as Indians. And then, of course, because they are officers, they will also get then given section commander tasks and change around. And they'll also be, when they do troop battle drills, they do it as Indians, and then they get told to do it as troop commanders. And that's the only difference. But you know what? When we do recruit training, we actually give our recruits the task as section commanders and troop commanders under our guidance. And from that, we choose future leaders at that stage by making them what we call diamonds. And that puts them on the promotion ladder straight away, and gives them an added boost to their being selected for promotion. So when you train people from the beginning, you can also identify leadership by giving them leadership tasks, because you recognise that he's a good lad, and then you're going to see if he can do it if he can actually do it. He appears to be a good lad, but some good lads actually aren't born to lead, and he fails. Or in most cases, if he's a good lad at doing the basics and above average, he's probably going to be a good leader, I find. Well, it certainly has some leadership capability. So everybody's a winner, and you're building that foundation from the early days. But if you get this new army, as you just mentioned, then it's everybody goes back to the basic.
Yeah.
We did make one mistake also at our level. And this is no criticism, because I think he was very good. Was that the Baltic Battalion commander was an Estonian. I think he's always going to be high in my estimation. But because he was the battalion commander, he spent his time in the office. I think he should have also been a grunt, just like the troop, because the troop commanders and all the other sergeants and everything else, they all did everything from day one training, and we built it up. I think it would have given him an extra boost to his conviction later on in life.
And in terms of, like, in the beginning, it may seem like, hey, it's we have so many, more important things to do. But in reality, if you actually spend that half a year pretty much doing the grunt thing, it will have a major outcome.
thing is, it's going to affect it's going to affect your judgment,
Yes.
and it's going to gain empathy as well. I think the biggest thing for me was with the old Soviet types, you would have suddenly given them an empathy and understanding of what a real soldier is and what he can do. And it'd be a big wow. Like, for example, that guy said to me, I thought I knew everything. And at the end I realised I didn't know anything, And he also said he really enjoyed it. And that was the other thing. They were working hard and the rest of it, but they enjoyed it. They looked back on the Baltic Battalion training in Ojaste as one of the, literally, quote unquote, and this guy became a general actually, now in government, and he said to me, that was the best period of my life. I really enjoyed it. Every Friday, we would try and plan it that they recognised that week they'd learned something and had improved. And on that Friday, when they got on the bus back to Estonia, they were so happy because they felt they'd earned. They were now being proud of themselves, and they knew that they had done something hard. They knew they had learned something, and they could recognise it. So I know when I wrote training programs and how I did things, I would always try and ensure it that I could do a module where on the Friday we'd completed a task, or at least we were on the ladder upwards, and by practically doing something, and they could see that they'd improved. And they may get a critique, but they would also get told how they'd improved, what we got to do to improve ourselves in the future. But so far so good, and it'd be like, but it had to be an honest evaluation, not just what I mentioned before. You're good, I'm good, I keep you sweet, you say nice things about me. No. And sometimes they hate me and not happy. So be you didn't do very good today, and we're going to have to do more training next week to find out why and to improve it.
So by the end of, yeah, go on.
So but that didn't happen often, because you know what, I do actually like happy soldiers. I like happy people, and making people upset and angry and malcontent, because that's what we do. We're gonna beast, we're gonna thrash, we're gonna, it's making them strong. No, it's not. I don't agree with that. No. But it is some people think that destroying your troops is actually building them. No.
Yeah, I guess they just lack in understanding how proper troops are or like what kind of troops you actually need. Like destroying people, it can be part of it, but again, you have to understand why you are doing it, in what phase, why you need to do it. I don't know, maybe you act like an asshole because you want to induce stress, or I don't know, whatever you want to teach them.
If you can, okay, I say it this way. I can be a pussy or I can be a wolf, or everything in between. I prefer, and also based on the fact, also being myself. Just be yourself. Don't try and be a different person. Don't try and put on an act. But there is a time and place, though, for some ruthless, hard. I don't like to use the word destroy, but certainly, you are exhausted, but for a reason. But that's it. There's got to be a reason. And that's another thing that I picked up on, is if you enjoy it, if you enjoy seeing people suffer, you're in the wrong job. Because
for sure.
Because in that position, you actually do have power over life and death to a certain degree. And you can kill soldiers. I was nearly killed in training. I nearly died on a speed march because they I think they deliberately chosen to do an added 2 kilometres, but there's a time limit, so you have to go faster. And out of 21 of us, only 7 of us got to the end in time, and I actually collapsed with heat exhaustion. And as I mentioned before, my lips were blue.
Mm-hmm.
I was shallow breathing, and I wasn't sweating, and I was unconscious. Well, I now understand that those are the signs of extreme heat exhaustion. And if not treated quickly, you're going to die. Now that was at the end, and they got me straight to the hospital. And I actually woke up in a cold bath surrounded by medics and doctors. And I didn't even know where I was. I was completely out of it. So they pushed me till the point of distraction. Okay, they made a mistake, but if you enjoy pushing people just because you get a pleasure from it, and I've seen it. I think my trainer, my section commander in training, he had a little twinkle in his eye, and because I've got a good memory, and I examine things now from an experience point of view, and I now understand he enjoyed hurting us. Now, as I say, if you've got to hurt someone through training, you've got to understand there's a reason, but I don't enjoy it. It's just got to be done. So I'm not going to have sympathy for you, because this is for you. This is for your benefit. You're going to be stronger for it. And at the end of it, you're going to go, oh, I could do that. I was, and people actually boast about it, you know. They did this to us and I survived this and all the rest of it. That's great. But if you enjoy it, no, because it means you might up and up and up until you really do hurt someone just because you're an evil bastard. And you do get them occasionally. You do get them.
I think that the truth is kind of in reverse, that you shouldn't be, as a soldier or a leader, enjoying making other people suffer, but you should enjoy suffering yourself.
Yeah.
Because that will be the thing that you need to be doing.
I would. My attitude towards this was, I would do it with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was it. So I would do a speed march with the troops. I did a speed march once with a GPMG, the one that we used to use in Estonia. I think we still do use it. Mounted, which was 63 pounds. And I did that because it actually amused me. Because it was the first time they'd done a 4-mile speed march, and I know that they'd heard, oh my God, speed marching is really hard, you know. So we'd actually had a weapon demonstration that day, and there was this weapon on the big tripod legs, and I said to the guys, I wonder if I can speed march with that. So when I did it, not only did I enjoy it, but the people under training were like inspired by it. So I think you should be fit enough to inspire, and also you've got to suffer with the men, and you gain so much from it. You gain so much from it, and that was my own policy, that I would, whenever possible, do everything with the men. And I didn't need to. I used to do the 30 milers with equipment and weapon the whole way at the end of recruit training, and often people thought I was a recruit. I was like, I'm not, I'm training. Yeah. It keeps.
Yeah, I think it's very important, because you need to understand. I think maybe even more importantly than you gaining the respect of your team, which is a awesome thing you needed.
Yeah.
But I think what you gain even more is you actually understand what suffering is and how it's happening, and now you can actually put it into your calculus when you're actually making decisions, because you need to put it in there, because if you don't know what suffering is, then you are not able to make good decisions.
You can't make the correct decisions if you don't understand the conditions of the soldiers. I remember reading a book about World War I again, and it was after the Battle of the Somme, one major battle, and the biggest problem they had was that the hierarchy was so far. I mean, this is the real hierarchy. Was so far back. They never saw the conditions the troops were under, and the ground was just a muddy quagmire that was difficult to take 2 or 3 paces in. and they'd lost the battle and lost, 100,000 men. And this staff officer, he wrote that he broke down and wept when he understood what the men had been asked to do. But of course, it's too late.
Yeah.
So a good commander will always go to the front and understand the front and understand the conditions. Now, of course, I don't expect him to be living in a trench with the front men, but if he's actually lived in those conditions at some stage in his training, he will have empathy for what they're going through and an understanding that. And also, I talked about having no sympathy for somebody, whinging because he's under pressure and obviously cold and wet and physically doing something hard. Because guess what? I've done it 100 times. It's okay. It's just part of life. So I'm not going to go, oh my God, I know it's hard. I wish I could make it easier. I'll make it easier. No, I won't. Because it's the way it is. Because you need to learn to be wet and cold. You need to be able to do things when you're completely tired. You need to do what you're doing, and it's extremely physically demanding. Because that's what we do.
Yeah, you have to have that taste. You have to have that understanding how to survive it. Otherwise, you are also in darkness. You have a wrong impression of what it takes from you.
And also, what you can do is raise it too high, and you expect things from them which you can't do, haven't done. But now, because you're the commander, you can just and you do. And I've seen this as well. People who have been trained, they forget. They become a bit soft and they forget. So always get out and do it. Keep your hand in, so you don't lose touch.
Absolutely, and you can't understand the feedback you're getting and eventually.
And as you said, you also gain a lot of respect for that. And no matter how much rank you get out there, go and do it. And that's why I like my corps, because you'd often see quite senior people getting out and doing things with you, and I really like that.
Yeah, I love it. So
great.
and you were together with them in Latvia. So what do you think? What was the end state of that troop? Were they wolves now? And did you gain the respect in any way or form, or what were your assessment in the end when that 5 months got finished?
It's funny, because in fact it was actually, let me just think, we actually started in the January, and we actually moved to Estonia in I know exactly when we moved. It was my birthday, October the 16th, 1996. No, 95. I was in the battle school in 96. So October the 16th, 1995 was the day we actually moved to occupy Paldiski. I think we finished about September or late August and had some leave and all the rest of it. And they came back, did some admin, then moved. So let's just say 8 months. First of all, it never crossed my mind, nor does it cross my mind or thought process, do they respect me? Do they like me? I don't think that way. Because if you think that way, you may start acting because I will do things so they like me. I will do things so they respect me. But if you do things that they like, I don't think you're actually going to respect by doing it. But as I said, it's not in my equation. It's not in my thought process.
It's counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive. Do they like me? Have I earned their respect? It doesn't even cross, and it's never crossed my mind. As I said, one of the guys we know very well. He said to me, obviously quite a long time ago now, but it was some years after the event, and he said, I hated you. Do I like to be liked? Yeah, of course I do. Do I dislike being disliked? Yeah, of course I do. I'm a human, Is it nice to be told you're respected? Yeah. But but that's got to come from them unprompted
Yeah, absolutely.
and unscripted. I've not done it for that. If that's but of course I believe though if you do things correctly, you will earn respect. That's it. So it will come. It will become. It's never been a problem. I've never thought about it. But I believe I've earned respect. Yeah. But it was saying that I'm quite sure there's people who hate me. So it's okay. Totally cool. I think what's important is that you feel self-respect because you've done it how you believe to be properly. So no matter what they think about me, it's about how I think about myself. What I think about myself is important. What they think about me, I don't care.
So by the end of the 8 months, what did you think? How well did you do?
I thought they'd learnt a lot. I thought they'd learnt quickly. In something I didn't really think too much about them, but okay. These guys were minimum ranks of sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
Now that means a lot of training they've had previously. What I later found out that a lot of these guys were actually conscript sergeants, and might have only have been in conscript cycle even if they'd been in conscript cycle for a year. So I didn't actually comprehend their lack of previous service. So a fair assessment would be that they were excellent. Excellent, yeah. But to me, we'd done our job. Our job was to train them at different levels to behave, how to behave and act as an individual rifleman in a section and platoon, and how to behave. All of them to behave as section commanders and minimum. That's minimum. Because they became not only the trainers of the company, they then became the leadership element of the company in Lebanon. So that's a complete cycle there, and it worked, and they were good, and they were good because I'm not saying it. The Norwegians were astounded by how good they were, because they thought they were going to get an Eastern European conscript company. And basically they were just going to use them for shit jobs, and they actually were better than the Norwegian conscript company.
Mm-hmm.
They were shocked, but happy,
yeah,
but shocked.
So were there was there any major changes in terms of like you obviously started working in blind with whatever your training objectives were, like did you kind of change anything what was unforeseen which eventually get you to that result? Did you have to do any major shifts in the middle? Or?
The only shifts were that we needed more time. And I mentioned about we were going back in May. Well, that just got extended.
And who made that decision?
Well, that's way above my head. Somebody, it just naturally happened. I think probably it would have been.
Because then someone had to believe in it, right? Because otherwise, you wouldn't make a change from May to September. It's like.
Well, as I said, we got our foot in the door. I think they expected it to collapse. Not only did it not collapse, but eventually there was some major good feedback. Some very, which yet again I didn't understand at the time. And these are things which I've learnt later, and also understand more by being older and working at different levels. These very high levels are now talking to each other, and they're realising that hold on, it's actually working. It's like because they came and visited. Another key sentence. They came and visited, and they supervised. Like that supervision. We put all this. We've made the plan. We've made the effort, and from our level, the members of the Foreign Office came out. So this is high civilian civil service, because we were actually loaned to the Foreign Office to do this job. I found out, and they funded it, and they are the ones making decisions. Who would then tell our corps, this is what we want. The Foreign Office were getting great feedback, and they came out and visited, and they saw what we were doing, and they loved it. And yet again, I'm quite sure at many other levels, people talking, they realised that we've got something here, and it just started to grow. And I think they did have an end state, but I don't think they believed in it, and they now realised actually we can do this. And that's when they started grabbing other resources, and it actually started to grow. It started to grow.
Mm-hmm.
It did grow.
So the end state was what? Like for the troops. I mean,
the end state was to train the men in individual section and troop skills, to teach them to lead at all their different levels within that platoon, and also for certain members to be trained as instructors to teach what they had been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Under our supervision. Because yet again, if I was to be under, I've still got a supervisor somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the supervisor in this case would be the battalion, my boss in Latvia, who would come out and watch training or listen to reports, So if he'd heard that something was going wrong in Estonia, he'd have been right down there on my back, As it was, because he's heard good things, he's coming down and he can be comfortable. And of course, if people have been in the proper training system, he should expect this. But you still don't keep your eye off the ball. You're still a supervisor. It just becomes quite easy to supervise because you're doing a good job. Walk away.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of that's how what got you to Estonia as well, right? You became the supervisor in the beginning, or yes or no?
Yes, right. Okay, so there's 3 of us for each troop,
mm-hmm.
and one of us was selected, then asked, because it was voluntary, by the boss, would I continue, because we were now told that it's finishing in October, and a lot of the guys were quite happy. Well, yeah, great, they've had enough, and they're married guys, got families,
mm-hmm.
so they wanted to go back. I was asked by our boss. I did get on well with him actually. He said to me, would you, because he obviously wants people he thinks he wants the best himself, and so he picked me and he said, would you go to Estonia with them? And I just said, yeah, why not? Yeah, well, yeah. In fact, I said yes, sir, I will. Didn't take it. It was literally that. It was literally, yes, sir, I will. And the rest.
How long was the first assignment then in Estonia?
Well, okay, so I finished. I went there in October, and I left in March, April the following year in '96. Because now we've done a full cycle. Because I'd gone to Paldiski, I've supervised the company being trained by my guys,
mm-hmm.
including in that group was now the present Chod. They, on the culmination of that training, we had a battalion exercise where we all met together and did exercises and we had a individual competition for each section. My section won that. Or an Estonian section won that.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't me, it was an Estonian section won that individual skills. I was very pleased about that. And then that was the job done because they've created their company. And now this is where the Nordics come in, because they're going to take that company and go to Lebanon. Now the Norwegian colonel who was going to take them came to see me in Paldiski, and he actually asked me if I would go with them to Lebanon. I of course, and I said the same thing. Yeah, I'll go. Because he thought it was quite right. Well, I think it was a good decision. He thought, because I've now got I've seen them from day one, and it'd be
Yeah.
I could be like a representative between the Norwegians and
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be quite honest. I know that the Estonians would have liked me to be with them because they would have liked me to help them if they thought there was something they weren't quite sure of, and I could just to say yes, the right way. Oh no, I'll tell you, I'll give you a bit of extra training,
Mm-hmm.
because they had travelled so far in such a short space of time. I could understand why they may feel that. And I got told once by somebody that I was their safety blanket. If they felt uncomfortable, just get me. And they feel a lot better. That's nice. But at one day the father has to go, and they've got to grow up on their own 2 feet. So that's fine because whilst the request did go forward along the correct military lines, the Royal Marines were quite happy with it, but NATO or whatever the structure was, they said that Britain does not have any agreement to be in that part of the UN region. There's no Brits in that region. We've not signed up to have Brits there, so you can't go because you're a Brit.
Mm-hmm.
Bit sad, really. Well, yeah, it was a bit sad. I would like to have, but you know what? I ended up in a battle school instead.
But before you end up there, so the Estonians, they were pretty much now prepared. They sent the whole company to Lebanon.
Yeah.
All right. So that was one of the first kind of deployments that we had ever, right?
I think there was one before this to Bosnia.
Okay. Yeah, it could have been.
There was one. Yeah.
So when you flew back, then was there any what was your? Did you bring back any, I don't know, lessons that you provided to Brits from your experience? I guess it was 1 year or 1.5 years total.
I felt I'd learnt so much. I'd picked up so much information, especially about how the Russian military behave.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I had a wealth of information. You could call it intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely.
About the enemy forces, possible enemy forces, and I found nobody cared because because it's a two-way street. They had no vision about what I'd done.
Mm-hmm.
They had no vision. If I tried to explain to people what I'd gone through and what I'd seen and the conditions, they look at me with blank eyes. And also one of disinterest, because they couldn't empathise because they couldn't visualise what I'm talking about, and that's a problem I've had to this present day actually. Apart from a few people, I found British SF. If I talk to them, they understand what I'm talking about straight away.
Absolutely, because it kind of sounds like you were put on a task which kind of these days would be special operations task.
It'd be an SF team of 12 men.
Yes, yep, exactly. And you did it kind of
and
alone or
and
with
all,
few people.
And all the resources, because that's something else. We had no resources. I think
that's I love that. I love that part. You know why? Because I think that actually makes you innovate and actually figure out how to adapt, which will makes you much. The experience without resources sucks more, but it's much better teacher than anything else.
Yeah, I mean that's what I said. I learnt a lot.
Yeah.
And also because I was making decisions. I was having to make decisions which normally would not be in my pay grade.
Yeah.
I love that. So I was making plans, I was making decisions, people were coming to me. It wasn't that I could feel like the big chief, but it felt really good that I could see a problem and I could resolve it on myself. I didn't need to go to anybody. It was me. There was nobody else. It's me.
So yeah, you were kind of you were given ownership and you had the possibility to get shit happening, right? So it was kind of you were in a position where you were able to utilize the decentralized command, and that's what people like. That's what actually makes you want to do your things, because you now can make decisions and make things happen, and you can adjust, and you can actually, you have the power, you feel the power, and actually you're able to make the plan. You are now believing your plan because it's your plan. You want to defend your plan because it's your plan. So if things go wrong, you adjust because it was your plan. You don't want it to fail. So I think that's the power of it all, and I think that's pretty much the example of what the special operations who are put to actually do this kind of job should do. And I'm not sure if the training what they get kind of helps them to become what you did there, because I think that if to be in the position and to go through what you've done is kind of like the perfect 30-year story of how special operations should kind of work, in terms of what's the strategy behind it and how to eventually make your mission successful in 30 years. It just happened here in Estonia that the country is successful. You kind of turned around the Soviet mindset into whatever it is at the moment. You were in the beginning of it, planting seeds, whatever, right? So what do you think, like, what kind of training you should provide people who actually should go and do what you did? Because that's what special operations have to do. Usually it's like young men, 3 years in, they don't have any understanding of how to accomplish this kind of thing. I at least I think.
Yeah, I was actually that's a really difficult one to answer in a just a I'd have to sit down and literally write a book about it.
Yeah.
It's something I have thought about and been asked to do. I actually got asked. I didn't realise actually, but I think he was this guy. When I talk about units and names and things, but this one guy involved in the game said to me, "How old were you when you came out here? Or how long had you been in?" I said 20 years. And his guys. Now, yet again, I'm a great. I always back brief. I think I learnt this. This is one thing I learnt being on my own. Is that I would be my own back briefer. Because I've got a good memory. Afterwards, I would back brief myself and talk to myself about what I'd seen, and give myself answers to what I'm asking myself. And on my back brief from that party, it was. He asked me about my how long I've been in, and I remember looking at the faces. And now I'm older now, so there is a tendency to see people who are certainly experienced to be too young. I don't want to fall into that trap, and that's why I hate it when they say, "Oh, he's only a kid. He's 18. He's not a kid. He's not a child. He's of war age." And in World War II, we had fighter pilots at 18 and 21. So don't give to me this kid game. He's not a kid. He's an adult. And I joined up at 17 and 13 days. I was not a child. I did a man's job, and I was treated like a man, and I felt that I was a man. Don't tell me I was a child soldier, you idiot. Now, but they look young, and it is difficult, I think, for anyone who's 23, 24 to be put in a position where they're advising, a 35-year-old colonel. And also, I became me like a whiskey maturing over age, and the barrel now is life in doing things where I learn and gain more information with age and by doing, because there's a lot of things you can never be taught, you just learn it by doing. And why some people, also because of character, are able to do this or not do it. Because I also recognised that I know a lot of guys who are far better soldiers than me, but they could have not done what I did. They just went, nope, not putting up with this, and walked away. Walked away. They couldn't have. They couldn't have. They couldn't have found a way to get on with people. You couldn't. They couldn't adjust. They couldn't adjust to who they're talking to. So I certainly recognise that within myself. I'll try and answer that question like this. First of all, you've got to know your job. By knowing your job will also breed the confidence. So obviously, goes without saying, you must have lots of knowledge. You must have the ability to gain trust. And you gain trust by doing some things we just talked about. You actually earn trust by doing things and they see it. So they gain trust. And you're doing things which they don't believe until they see it themselves. And that's part of the gaining the trust and leadership by example. Because once you gain trust at any age, you can get people to listen. And then I think at any age, if you've got the knowledge and you can get them to listen, and you can explain and show, they will naturally follow if it's a good way. And within that, there's a humbleness, because accepting who they are for what they are and why they are. And when they can't do something which you would expect, you don't get angry, you just fix it. Patience. You have to have a quality of patience of a saint. Because in some circumstances, if you want to bring people up to your level, it's going to require a lot of time, a lot of winning hearts and minds. It's going to be a painful, emotional process to yourself. Because the system you came from, because it is a system, you saw and had the vision of it being done so much easier. But you have to accept that your new circumstances are not the same as you've come from. So you accept your circumstance and you adapt to it. And I know I did many things differently to how I may have done them in UK, because it was a completely different environment. But I always had the guiding principle of having the knowledge and the proven teaching ability, because my shield was my knowledge. Because I took a lot of shit personally, a lot of criticism, but I knew what I was teaching was correct. Prove me wrong. And if you want to still give me shit and talk about me behind my back, I don't care. So it melds into some other things I've said. But I have got total conviction that what I'm doing is right, based on my hard training and having done it myself. So the people who come and teach have to have been trained thoroughly themselves, and they have total conviction in how they do business. So under pressure, they can hold to their belief. Unless somebody can explain to them why they do it differently. And then you can adapt to the local environment and learn from it yourself. It could be a two-way street. So I think the humbleness bit with it, is very important. So if I wrote,
I think that there are not.
And the moral courage, knowing that you can. Okay, moral courage definitely, because you are getting nothing from this yourself personally, but you know it's for the benefit of them and the mission. because you can play the easy game of, yeah, you're great, yeah, I accept what you're saying, we do it your way, when you know it's going to end in disaster. But you just take the easy route. So you definitely need moral courage, and you need determination, because people will not want to change their ways in many environments. You've got to force it upon them initially by doing it yourself, by gaining trust. But I personally found that no matter how resistant people are, they know that what you're doing is correct. And even when they say, I'm not going to do that when you're not here, they do it when you've gone. And I've known that personally to happen.
So, would you? I mean, to me, what your story kind of represents is that there are not many stories that I'm just not aware of. There are many of them, most likely, where there is kind of this kind of campaign happening, and it's kind of like a blueprint in a way how this kind of mission should go in the perfect world. It happened with you, and you kind of didn't have the training for that in a way how it's trained at the moment for some of the units. That that is actually the purpose of you. And I think that it is very hard to teach and train something what you did, because so little amount of people know how to do it. There is very little amount of people who have ever done it, and then even if you have done it successfully, most likely, if there are a lot of Americans and Brit units and all the units that have been successful, it never comes out. Nobody knows. You can only read it like I don't know, 50 years ago, what happened before the First World War, how all the things were actually made happen. Not common knowledge for most of the people. So you could actually kind of like read it from the history books. So it's hard to build up a training system which kind of helps the young soldier, 3 years in, 4 years in, to even get to that like understanding, because it's like a way of thinking. It's more beyond the drills. It's more beyond what you can train a bunch of people into doing. It kind of needs a certain type of thinking, and there is a strategy behind it. There are tactics behind it, but it goes more into a lane of what intelligence services are doing than what a common soldier is taught on a battlefield, in a way. Or won't you agree with that?
I think everything I've done was not planned.
Mm-hmm.
It happened.
Yeah.
Because if people had told me, or if I could vision it, I would have said no way, no way, no way, no way, no way. No, I couldn't have done it. No, I couldn't have done it. No way. So sometimes ignorance is a blessing, we say. I believe that fundamentally, though, my training as a Royal Marine, with all its ethos and characteristics, and my thorough knowledge by also doing everything within the platoon and company, and my experience of teaching that previously, is definitely the starting point for anybody in my position when they come to another land, because they have to be convinced themselves, no matter what opposition, they don't bend to the wind and continue. And that in every bad situation, whether it be lack of equipment or bad attitude or unwillingness to learn, you are determined, and you have the willpower. And I had the determination and willpower because I saw how good the Estonians were in the first company I trained. Because now I'm talking about when I put on the Estonian uniform. So I think really, what was the training for me? You could say specific mission training for me was doing Baltic, because I was introduced to the problems, but it was progressive training because I was still under the British umbrella of help, and I had my other comrades there. Because the other thing which was unique to me, I think, and which I would not wish on anybody, is being on your own. I was on my own, which may not sound a big deal, but it was a very big deal in the early years. In the battle school, for example, I never had a conversation for 7 months that was just normal everyday conversation. I didn't talk to people from Friday to Saturday morning till Monday morning. Everything I talked about in the week was military. Mm-hmm. I had no books to read. I had no television to watch. I had no internet. It was very lonely. But I was absolutely committed with conviction, because it is a two-way street. I felt the people were worth my effort. And I believed I could be successful. I understood, though, it wouldn't be an easy job. But that goes back to my previous talk about my core ethos, because a hard job, so what? Yeah, so what? And never give up. The other attitude is never give up. I was told by my boss, I had a contact back in UK. He said, "This is my phone number. At any time you want to come back, just ring me up and I'll get you a ticket." Mm-hmm. He said, "No problem." Because when I came out here in Estonian uniform, on British uniform, on loan service, they were told nothing except, "We want him out here." That was it. That's all they knew. And that was at MOD level, as I mentioned before once. So the Corps they were told from the MOD, "We want this man out there. Send him." That was it. What am I doing? Don't know. Just go out there. When I came back, I didn't know where I was going or what I was being tasked with. So I actually found my own way myself again at the battle school. So you have to have the intelligence and cognitive ability to work out the situation and decide, how am I going to make this work.
And I think that I see so many parallels in how you say that it was not planned, right? It just happened. Another thing happened.
Yeah.
And I see it a lot with my story, how I pretty much got where I am at the moment. I mean, working alongside with Chaco and the SEALs, right? It's when I was in the force, if someone would have told me that, hey, 2 years from now, you are actually, I don't know, playing poker for a living. Then when someone would have told me that, hey, you will be in bankrupt in 1 year, and then you will read a book which will change your life, and I don't know, and it will be about ownership, and it will speak about the stuff what you did in the military, and then you will eventually be in a podcast with the author of an American bestseller, right? I would have said, hey, you have, I don't know, you have a brain tumor, because that's not possible. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Then if someone would have told me at that time that, hey, in 2 years you will be in the Middle East selling tanks, I was like, okay, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. I don't even have any experience in the civilian sector. That's not going to happen. Then as I was there, if someone would have said that, hey, you are going to have your own consultancy company, and with your knowledge, with your background, not being on a commander's position, and actually leading troops in anything else, in actual like war, like haven't been a commander in that position, that you were eventually going to be training leaders, the top level leadership of, I don't know, startups that are worth, I don't know, billions. Then there's like the ministries. So kindergarten teachers, school teachers, like all over the board in Estonia, and you're kind of consulting the highest leadership, kind of like on a national level, some of the teams that are the most important at the moment for this country, and that I'm going to be there. I would say that they were nuts. It's like
because
ridiculous, right?
you can't plan for that.
Yeah.
You might say to yourself that it would be great if I could do that, but I don't think you could sit down and write a methodology or a program of what you need to do, learning and all the rest of it to get to that end state. I think you would have a good idea of something. What if I call that a ladder of life? Further on down that ladder, you've chosen something to go for, and once you climb somewhere on that ladder, you see something else. You see another route to take, or actually, what you've done is pushed you in that direction.
Yes.
And then you go, that worked, and something else opens up, and
Yep.
and that's why I think it's very difficult when it's such a complex life you've had to explain that to anyone, because you've got to do it to understand it. It's got to happen to you. So whilst I get a taste of what you told me, I can't envision that because there's too much there and I've not done it myself. And that's out to explain to me actually when I've tried to explain to people what I've done. And it's not okay. I get a blank look, and I actually chose not to talk to anyone about it, unless it's a reason to try and explain something of why because I still, if I can, will help somebody to help Estonia. So I'll try and give them a bit, but I'll give a bit of advice. If they've got a question, I can use an example of real time because everything I talk about is real time. No, this is what I did. I'm not, because otherwise you'd be thinking, no, you can't do that. No, I did do it. It can happen. This happened. So I've got total confidence to say it, and I can, it's real. That's how I can only describe it. So I could not have envisioned in any way how my life was going to pan out, except when I came back to Estonia to put on the uniform, I only gave myself this simple statement, something like this. My golden rule was to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was to the listener, and I could lose my job, for example. I didn't come here for a job. It wasn't a job. It was a proper mission. It was a mission almost like a missionary, like a religious thing. To be honest, it's like a religious thing, And because I was prepared to die doing it, and I mean die in a way where I lose my life in a financial way, where I lose my mind in a psychological way, where I burn so many bridges, where I can't get a job back in the UK. I'm now too old and out of it, and all the rest of it. So I said to myself, I will either ruin my life or do a lot of good and I've not wasted my life. That's how, and there's no in between there. No in between. So I couldn't anticipate really what was going to happen, except get your feet on the ground and take each day at a time. And each day will lead you to the next day. But if you've got a guiding principle of what you want at the end, which I did, it's okay. I just will get each day done, or each week, and try and plan for the next week if I can. I found often it was very hard even to plan for next week because how am I going to make this week work? So if I tried to explain that to a Brit, they'd laugh on my face. For you can't conduct training that way. Well, if you're in a situation where if you don't make today work, why do I care about tomorrow if it works? I've got to make today work. And I know a lot of Estonians have been put in that position. I fully empathise and understand it. But it's not a system and it has to change.
So I like hearing you. I get where you're coming from. Now I still have something in me that actually thinks that there is a system behind it. That there is a possibility to actually do it. Like you can't predict it specifically, but there are the guiding principles that actually led you here. It's like you're kind of like trying to win at all costs, regardless, like you're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, regardless if you're able to make it or not. And then obviously you just have to have a direction. Like you have to have some sort of a direction north. If you don't have any direction, and the direction in many cases comes from within you. If there is no real direction, I mean, your moral compass can provide you a direction that, hey, this is right, this is wrong, I'm just going to do what's right, and then you have to have the gut to actually make it happen. But I think that there are principles behind it which can be taught, and I think those principles in what can be taught from your story, from my story, from many other stories like this, where there wasn't, it's not like, it doesn't feel like it could be predictable. I think that those lessons and the principles behind the actual success of moving forward, making steps forward, not having a plan, going through that chaos, actually is something what the soldiers who has a very rigid system actually need on top of the rigid system, because that's something which is not taught in many cases at all.
What allowed me to do this was because I was taught in a rigid system.
Yeah, absolutely, because that gave you the freedom to be spontaneous.
That was the bedrock.
Yeah.
And then once you can do it by the numbers, you're then allowed to do it. You can. I always say to them, look, at the end of the day, you can do that section battle drill any way you want, but you better be successful with minimal casualties. And I like no casualties. And if you do that, and you do it a completely different way to what I've trained you, and you were a success, I'll just go great. But if you didn't, and you get massacred, you know. So, first of all, I did actually read a load. There's so much information about leadership that is put in like principles and descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't like to teach leadership by reading all those principles.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely when I started doing these podcasts, I thought I'd better do a bit of prep, because I think you might ask some of these questions. And I actually went through a lot of these principles and different methods of leadership. And I forget what it's called now. It's something like individual leadership. I think it was it was individual leadership. And the principles were something like vision, risk taking, building a team. And when I went through all those principles, I thought, actually, that describes me. So you can definitely formulate it to quantify what type of leadership that is. But I don't think, but you cannot say you must have a vision, you must build a team. And there's things like determination and sacrifice were part of that leadership principle. But once I can say that, I can't, by saying it, will not make you a person who can suddenly be who will sacrifice themselves for the greater good. I can't make you build a team because I've said you must build a team. If you get where I'm coming from with this one. But if I was to have those leadership principles and you are committed on your own to do what I did, I will have to make sure that, first of all, as a supervisor, that you've got those qualities. I believe, first of all, you are prepared to sacrifice. You've shown those qualities, self-sacrifice. I've seen your team building capabilities. You can do that. We certainly work under the ethos where you're allowed to take risks, but it's a calculated risk. It's a calculated risk. So actually, you can actually, by experience and training someone, find out if they've got those characteristics and then select them, and then are they trained to fulfil those other things in the boxes? Absolutely. So when I went through those things, I thought, yeah, I'm an individual. My leadership traits are individual. What is described as individual. And but when I carry out some of these skills, I can also be a diplomatic leader, or in fact, no, it's a democratic leader, which I really do like to do. But a democratic leader is not asking everyone if I can do it. It's just taking input from everybody, and you make the final decision. But of course, that democratic leadership relies upon the people you are asking. You trust them with what they're going to say, so they must be trained as well to a certain standard. You don't. And autocratic leadership, and at times I would have to choose autocratic. I've got no time to ask. I've got no time to pretty please to make you come on board. This is what we're going to do, and you're going to do it now. And that's when I go from being pussycat to wolf.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when I read through all these different things, I realised that at different times I may choose what could be described as those types of leadership. But my leadership traits for what I achieved out here were the individual leader. I could tick all those boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I think it's that the there are those like systems, and you can't really like separate them. They're like individual like tools. Like democracy, kind of in a way, it's a tool.
It's a tool. They're tools.
Yeah, like the autocracy is a tool. It's a, but I think that the if there is an absence of principles in the military, like then that is a mistake. Like there should be principles which should be guiding you, which are like, I don't know, lead by example. You just have to understand what it means, and it's very hard to understand what it means when someone just tells you the theory. Hey, leading by example works. You kind of have to ingrain and showcase that somehow into the training so that it is demonstratable in some way or form, and feel that they can feel it. And I think that's something which can be accomplished.
And of course, when you choose people by selection for different tasks, and you know, for example, leadership by example is going to be very necessary in this case, because you've got a system, and you can now, you know what to look for, and he's had promotion reports or other reports, so you've seen him by real time, and you go, yeah, he's really good at leadership by example. So especially for those jobs that you do, let's say you would select people, let's say you select, you could, as I said, I'm quite sure those, when they select these people in the start of their, whether it's buds or whatever, they're not only looking for he's a great soldier or whatever, they're looking for these other qualities, because I think personal qualities are very important. P's and Q's, we say. P's and Q's. As I said before, one of the simple ones I got taught years ago were, and it was a simple one, but I use it quickly to judge, judgment, bearing, willpower, integrity, courage, both moral and physical, knowledge. Knowledge, has he got those? And I did it once, and I just went. I actually put a cross against each box, and I thought, you know what? Because you see, I took these values as inherent, but you know what? They're not. They're not. And perhaps without realising it, part of training was to get out people who. To get out wrong people. I know that within our promotion system and training, that if you find anybody's got a bad character or a bad attitude, or lack some of those points I've made, integrity, for example, knowledge, that he could be very clever and has got all the knowledge, but the guy's an asshole.
Yep.
And he makes judgments based on the wrong reason, because he's a selfish bastard. But he's got knowledge, and you've also given him rank without understanding this. He now becomes a very dangerous person to fulfilling the aim, whether it's in a job, in an industry, building a machine, or looking after people who build machines or whatever. And that's why giving out rank in the military, because the military works on an autocross. What's it? Not aristo. I just said it.
Autocratic.
Autocratic leadership. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you have an and that's when you get toxic leadership. When you've got an autocratic leader, which is by its very nature in the military, you have to have autocratic leadership. And autocratic leadership is great if you've got. I mean, my boss. I've had many bosses. They said I do. Not a problem. Absolutely trusted him. He just says, I want this done. I'll go and do it. In no way do I have to worry about. I've got to question him. Why am I doing it? Because this is not a way to run a military. But he also understands, even a good autocratic leader, that because he's got those different levels of levers to pull. If the time was appropriate, and I say, boss, look, I've got a question. Because that's another thing. When you give a task, you should always allow for questions. When time was appropriate. I mean, on the battlefield, no, we haven't got time for questions. We want to just do it. But that's why I say it's a balance of which one you choose, and you should feel free. I know in my job as a leader, certainly, I love questions. Yeah. And my only caveat was, don't ask me. Well, no, it can ask me a stupid question. If it's a stupid question for an honest reason, it's okay. If you're asking me a stupid question because you're trying to catch me out or make me look foolish or because you're just an arsehole, well, that's different. And you've now, within my previous life, then you've marked yourself out as a poor character, and you need to stand by. You're undermining my leadership. You're trying to undermine my leadership and asking me questions in front of a large audience just to try and make me look foolish. Well, that's just undermining our job. So you're a bad character. And again, I never found that in my corps because we've had a selection process. So it's very important, and that's another problem we've had within the EDF, I believe, because you've had in the early days, a poor selection process. You've had a lot of people with bad character getting high rank. And it's autocratic. And they don't allow criticism. Anybody who doesn't follow their narrative is crushed or dismissed or can't get promoted. That's so I recognise now that people with rank without good personal qualities, it's a massive mistake. It leads to you can't get anything done.
I agree. So we are about to end here. I think that one of the interesting things we will continue next time will be this, like the leadership qualities and stuff like that as well. And I think it's a lot to tie in with the perspective of how people see, because I can see, as everyone knows, like you can see the glass is half empty, and it can also be seen as half full. Like that's a good example of how you can look at the same thing, and for one person this is respect, for other person this is not respectful at all. So you have to understand how you are demonstrating something and how it is interpreted by the other person. So there is certainly the depth into all of that, how you can lead by example. And with all the other things, I think that the battlefield skills, they are kind of like measurable. You either hit the target or not. Yeah. Like, and it's easier system to actually teach because it's like measurable. And those leadership attributes or whatever, like they're a bit harder to actually measure. There's no metric system behind it, and that's why it's also more complicated.
The point you made about offending people, because I talked about you must be honest, and I'm prepared to upset people, or I'm prepared that hearing something that goes against their narrative or is hurtful to what they think the situation to be, might hurt their feelings or make them angry. You have to be prepared to accept that. But if you've got a bad way of putting your message across, which unnecessarily will cause a bad reaction, well, you shouldn't be in that job. Because actually, and I would say this, depending on who I'm talking to, depends on how I will try and get that, let's just say, bad news across. Because what I don't want to do is alienate that person. Not because I'm frightened of he doesn't like me or whatever, but I understand that I still need him to work with me. So I will put it across on how I can gauge his character and the circumstances we're in at the moment. And as I said, based on they know you are doing things for the right reason, because they recognise that you get nothing from it yourself either. Because that's another thing. It's never about me. I want my name on nothing. I want no monetary reward. All I want is things to be done properly. And that's my reward. Mm-hmm. And if you can, if that's your level, and they understand that, and this is something I can only learn. I can only be self-taught really, and based on your own qualities. And that's why, I talked about my father and some leaders I met in my early years. They helped to form my character, which, as it happened, turned out to be blessed for me in this unique situation. Because for sure, I absolutely understand. You can really turn people against you, and you didn't need to. Mm-hmm. So on the very odd occasion, I've decided there's no point in explaining what's wrong to that person, because they're not going to change anything anyway, and they may stop me even more from doing what I'm doing, which is a benefit to other people at this moment. And I'll cross that bridge at a later date.
Mm-hmm. So I think
it's very if we think about it, quite complex, and which I've learned over years, and that's why you need experienced people, and that's why you normally in the SF they like the guys are normally older.
Mm-hmm. And you have to have the variety that someone at least brings in that knowledge that can actually
and the variety.
Explain it.
You can choose. Yeah, you do. So I did learn. I called it how you play the violin. Sometimes it's sharp and heavy, and other times it's just soft. Yeah. So I would change the tune of my violin depending on the circumstances and how I judge the situation.
And you have to have a very good understanding of the circumstance.
Yeah, and you also got to be a little bit of a psychologist, to be honest, which you learn.
Absolutely.
Without even knowing it, you become a psychologist, and you know what buttons to press and not press, and
you have to know how to play the game.
It is actually. You're right. It is playing the game.
Yeah.
And if you're playing it for the right reason, the right way, you're okay. If you play the game just to get self-benefit, then goes again. You're doing it for selfish reasons. Yeah. So you you absolutely have to know how to play the game.
Yeah, and I think that the way how I want to finalize it today here, because we literally have a few minutes left. Then you need to want your team to succeed more than you. You need you need to want kind of like that the job or in your case Estonia would succeed regardless of what happens with me.
Yeah,
right?
that was it. It's not about. I was prepared to sacrifice myself for Estonia. End of story.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the thing, right?
And you know what? That is quite empowering, and it's quite powerful because
absolutely,
I'm not frightened of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not frightened of anything, and I accept it, and I accepted that it could ruin my life. Because once you accept that, I'm not thinking about, oh my God, if I do that, if I say that, I could, I didn't have to worry. I actually had someone once say to me, "If you don't tell me this, you lost your job now." My reply was, "I'm not telling you."
Yeah,
And he just walked away. I called his bluff.
yeah, that's how you. Yeah, that's how you.
I'm not changing. I'm not going to play your game.
Mhm. That's how you win in life. Like in my opinion, as a leader as well. Like it kind of is the thing where you um, it kind of looks like, and I've constantly been thinking of that when helping customers, is that it feels a lot of times to me that I want them to succeed more than they themselves want to succeed.
Yeah,
Like,
that's good. That's good.
I kind of need to want to help them more than they kind of are willing to take.
I describe it like this: you have to have a passion for it. It's an emotion. I have a passion. I want you to. And if anybody, or I try and get it across to people, if you really want to help Estonia, it's not just a 6-month tour. You have to have a passion, a real driving force, a passion to change, to help. It's not just going by the numbers, do your 6 months and go. It is a real passion. You want to help with a absolute passion.
And that's how everyone should do everything.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the beginning of having that kind of possible path. If you don't have that, then it's not going to happen ever. So, so that's today. Thank you everyone for listening. We will be back soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Remo. Great talking to you today, and the audience for listening.
Absolutely. So have a nice end of the year, everyone, because this will be out before the end of the year. Bye-bye.